because you're not just a politician or a member of parliament, you're first a Kenyan. So would you please share your experience with us? How much and what can you do with 1,000 shillings in this economic situation?
Okay, maybe I will approach that question in another perspective.
No, very briefly, just what you can do with 1,000 shillings.
Basically, maybe before I say what I can do with 1,000 shillings, Anki, you know very well, the economy is not static. What you could do with 1,000 shillings 10 years ago is not what you can do with 1,000 shillings right now, because the economy grows, things become expensive. You have even the shilling 10 years ago, maybe it was 75 shillings. Now we are approaching 140.
That's right.
So you can see everything has doubled. So it is also good to tell our people that the economy is not static. Things change. And as Kenyans, we also have to accept that change and change with the dynamics of our conditions. So what you can do with 1,000 shillings depends on where we are economically right now. And you know very well that things have gone up. And as a government, we are trying all the modalities to make sure that we can bring things down kidogo. Not so. I cannot promise you that you will have an unga of 100 shillings in the near future, or sugar of maybe 100 shillings in the near future. So what you can do with 1,000 shillings, if you wanted to do with that 1,000 shillings what you could do 5 years ago, then maybe you will need around 1,500 to be able to adjust accordingly.
Mheshimiwa, it's a Friday. I'll encourage you to ease up a little bit. It is not on behalf of the government, but you have a family. You go, you eat. And I just want to understand what you would do with 1,000 shillings.
What I'm telling you are facts.
Would you buy sugar? Would you buy, what would you do with 1,000 shillings?
Of course, it will depend on what are your needs that time. So maybe it's a Friday, you'll go and enjoy. Maybe you have no hunger, you'll go and buy hunger. Maybe
that's right.
Maybe you have no cooking oil, you'll go and buy cooking oil. So it will depend. But what we want to encourage Kenyans is that the economy is moving. Can we try also to move with the economy the way it is moving? Because I don't want to tell our people that we can go back to what we used to do with 1,000 shillings 10 years ago. It's impossible.
And that is actually realistic. Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa, for your answer. But I will continue to insist on your budget plan with 1,000 shillings. For the border riders, however, they have called on the government to relook the Finance Bill 2023 and especially the proposed VAT hike on petroleum products. The border industry, which employs over 1.8 million riders across the country, remains apprehensive of the looming implications should members of parliament pass the bill. Here's our reporter and anchor, Milia Kisienya, with more.
The border industry gained popularity over time due to its ability to absorb many jobless youth, easing pressure on the government's quest to reduce unemployment. And amazingly, the push to boost the industry was firmly echoed by the Kenya Kwanza government.
Rais akumbuke wakati alikuwa anafanya siasa ama alikuwa anaturai kumchagua kama rais, alitumia jina letu sisi wanabodaboda na mama mboga sana. Angalie haya mafuta yanamkwaza zaidi mtu wa bodaboda ambaye pia kwa biashara ni mtu wa chini zaidi.
However, despite the industry helping over 1.8 million Kenyans across the country, many in the sector are now fearful of what the future holds. Their woes have been compounded by the recent fuel hike that has seen the cost of super petrol and diesel reach 182 Kenya shillings and 168 Kenya shillings per litre respectively.
Mtu wa nduta amekaa pale siku mzima ameleta shilingi 100. Kwa nyumba haiwezekana tola moja kwa siku iweze msaidia kwa nyumba.
Mtu kama hawezi pata kitu ya kuingia naye kwa nyumba, kama unapata shilingi 500 na mafuta inakunywa shilingi 400, that means una save shilingi 100. 100 utafanya naye nini kufika jioni?
A situation that could worsen should the Finance Bill 2023 be passed as it is. Initially, a border rider would make 1,000 Kenya shillings per day from an average of 15 rides. However, they are currently left with a meager profit of 300 and 400 shillings a day. Out of this sum, a sum of 450 shillings is deducted to pay loans they took to own the motorcycle. And if the motorcycle is on lease, 300 Kenya shilling is sent to the owner on a daily basis.
Kwa sasa ni kilio tu mtu wa pikipiki amekuwa mlala hoe, mtu ambaye alikuwa anaweza jimudu sasa amekuwa yeye ndio masikini ya mwisho. So tunashangaa hii hasla ilikuwa inamaanisha utakuwa kuwaso lukizidi kuwa masikini ama utakuwa kuwaso lukijisaidia. Tuelewe hiyo lugha ilikuwa ni lugha gani?
Meanwhile, as the National Assembly Finance Committee collects views on the proposed financed bill, for some the exercise remains out of reach.
Sijaona wakikuja mahali hapa kutulizia, sijaona kiongozi akikuja mahali hapa.
Hii VAT tunaomba wabunge wetu tuliweza kuwachagua na mkatulilia asubuhi. Tukatenda venye tulitenda. Na nyinyi pia mnapoenda kujadili, muangalie huyu mwananchi mdogo.
Watupunguzie hii leseni ya drive license. Hakuna haja mtu anaendesha V8 ya 30 million na mtu wa pikipiki yake ni 70,000, 150 pia analipa shilingi 3,000.
The bill, which is currently before Finance and National Planning Committee, seeks to reverse a decision made in 2018 where VAT on fuel was reduced to 8% to give Kenyans reprieve from the high cost of living. By amending a clause that seeks to harmonize the VAT Act, the VAT on fuel will double to 16%, meaning that the price of fuel in the country will go up by more than 13 Kenya shillings a litre based on the current prices. Media Kisinya, K24 TV.
Welcome back. Just to contextualize the high cost of living, which is indeed affecting every other part of the world. We've not heard of the, the dollar, we've heard of the Ukraine war, in Russia. We've heard about the COVID-19 pandemic. All these things pretty much touch different countries in the world. However, we are looking at a Kenyan situation, localizing it back at home. How do we cushion our own citizens is the question. And they say it's a very heavy mantle for the Kenya Kwanza regime having taken over during this particular era. And I want to go back to a finance expert. There has been a concern that there's a lot of criticism that is negative in as far as the high cost of living is concerned. But if you want to really make a Kenyan understand what it means adjusting, because if I borrow from what the Prime Secretary said yesterday, is that Kenyans should brace themselves for 3 tough years. When we started the year, the CS mentioned 2023 will be tough, but now the PS, the Prime, is saying 3 years. So this is just the beginning. What exactly is happening?
Yes, it's a very sad state of affair here in Kenya because this financial year, we expect to collect about 1.8 trillion. And the amount of money that we need to pay as debt is 1.4 trillion. So about 70% of our revenue collection will be given out as in form of repayment of debt. To bring it down to Wanjiko is actually to say if we have produced 100 bags of maize in a certain farm, then out of those 100 bags, 80 bags will not be consumed here in Kenya.
Okay.
It will be given out because we are repaying. So we will be left only with 20 bags to eat and also to get more seed for the next season, to take our children to school, to build roads. So if we didn't have this debt, like now, if we didn't have to give out these 80 bags out there, it would have been consumed here and the cost of living would have been lower. But because of the position that we find ourselves in, and when the CS, the Prime Minister was saying that, is because next year, our debt burden will actually be more than we have this year, because the next year is when we have the $2 billion Eurobond maturing, and we'll have another heavyweight debt maturing in 2025 and 2026. So in the next 3 years, it will be very hard for Kenyans. It will be very hard for Kenyans. So and of course, right now, the Finance Bill 2023 is underway. If it is passed the way it is without any amendments being done to it, yes, then the taxation will definitely increase, and that increases the cost of living. And what happens at the end of the day, businesses never pay taxes. Businesses don't pay taxes. The person who pays tax at the end of the day is the end consumer, because if the cost of operations for businesses goes up, and taxation included in that cost of operation, the business will pass that burden to Wanjiko. So at the end of the day, Wanjiko should be cautioned that the next 2 to 3 years, the situation does not look very, very, very friendly.
Thank you very much for that lens. And I want to hear from Honorable Buka. So far, he's saying if the tax bill is passed, the prices will go up. But as I see the feedback from the Kenyans, the price of sugar at 2 kg is already gone up, or pretty much the price of sugar. The price of unga is still, you know, they're trying to stabilize it here and there. Bread, you know, surprisingly has shot. And the price of oil, cooking oil, is not very fair as we're speaking. Now, the fuel prices equally have gone up. What happens when the bill goes up, just from your perspective and picking it from our expert here?
Thank you, Anki.
Yes.
First of all, when we talk about a global crisis, somebody might get the idea that this crisis is affecting every part of the world.
Most?
Because, you know, if you look at the world economies, they are much stable economy and they are unstable economies. Those countries that their governments have actually insisted that they are going to fire production, at least local production, then you see a much stable economy. For example, the Chinese economy has been stable for the last 20 years.
All right.
In fact, even with the denting of the COVID-19, they are still showing resilience. On the other side, you can see United States. In fact, the United States government is at the brink of default to pay even their own obligations. What that means is that there are certain governments that pursue certain policies that develop their people. There are others that pursue policies that actually develop a few people. When the Prime Minister, for example, Musalia Mudavadi, talks about let us prepare ourselves for hard economic times, he's not talking about himself. He's talking about the majority of the Kenyan people. The few people in this country are not going to be able to have problems in the next 3 years. It's the Wanjikos that are going to have actually problems. Now, in terms of agriculture, which I think has been mentioned as one of the key areas that can help us to develop. First of all, the land is in the hands of a few. So if you look at the land reports that we have seen, the few families that own lands and few multinationals and even others that have robbed lands through conservancy processes, how is that land going to be used for production? So if Kenya Kwanza government want to produce in terms of agriculture, in terms of large scale, they must have a clear policy on how the land, because we have a few families that are having land just idling for a long time. How is Kenya Kwanza government going to handle the land issue? Because you're not going to produce vertically when horizontally, even the mechanism to produce horizontally is not there. So the first thing that the Kenya Kwanza government, and probably Mheshimiwa here could lead that process in the House, is to make sure that the land comes to the majority of the Kenyan people. Then we can talk about large scale land. For example, if you look at the issue of subdivision of land, these are small pieces of land for poor families. But the big land today are still in the hands of the multinational companies, at the hands of a few, former or current political leaders. And the second, the tire of land belongs to what you call the conservancy. And that is what is bringing the crisis in terms of production. Once that is done, then we can talk about the second level of addressing the issue, which is actually what he was talking about. Mechanize the land, then start an industrial revolution, then a light industries, heavy industries, and you address that issue. On other issues, of course, on the finance bill that you mentioned, I have highlighted that this finance bill is very retrogressive. In fact, it was drafted by World Bank and IMF to justify what has just happened last week. Because last week, the World Bank has again approved a raft of loans to this government. In fact, when this government talks about issues to do with, they do not want to take loans because they want to raise money from the ordinary, they are actually not telling the Kenyans the truth. Because last week, the IMF and World Bank approved a raft of loans. And what is justifying that raft of loans was because the Kenya Kwanza government is going to be able to collect more taxes if this finance bill actually passes. In fact, the defendants of the Kenya Kwanza government today are not talking about how the public participation should enhance this finance bill. They are saying that this finance bill is good and it should pass the way it is. Now, Mheshimiwa here mentioned about the housing project, which I think it should be very clear to the Kenyan people that the housing project is a housing project to profit a few people. How is it going to profit a few people? Even I talked about the teachers saying that they are going to benefit. Remember, you are going to contribute 3%. After contributing 3%, you don't qualify for this affordable housing. You still have to deposit 25% to qualify for affordable housing. When we're talking about affordable housing, we're not talking about a house of 500,000 shillings. We are talking about 3 million shillings. So that means the people who have money that can afford this 25%, that can pay through this, and it is also a gambling process. Remember, even after paying 25%, and Mheshimiwa here can confirm, you are not going to be allocated any house because it's called Bahati Nasibu process because the Nyumba system that is being introduced. So it is basically a scheme for Jubilee government to raise money through taxation without saying it is tax.
All right, and now
Finally,
I want to come back to Honorable Buka. Allow me to correct for the sake of the viewer. We have the Kenya Kwanza government and not the Jubilee government. You missed out on that.
Sorry. The Kenya Kwanza government. Then secondly, on issues to do with I've also talked, and this
before
is,
I take a break, so that we give him a chance to reply.
This is referred to what my panelist here has said, that we should look at the demand and supply.
All right.
Fair enough. That is the market forces can control the demand and supply. But remember, the role of the government is to intervene in the economy, to protect. Because if you allow the market forces, then there is no need why we should be having a government of the day. The market forces will favor those who produce and those who actually buy and disfavor those who buy.
Right.
So when the Kenya Kwanza government sold their manifesto, they were trying to convince the majority that if we take this government, then the people at the lower bottom will benefit. How do you make them benefit? Two things.
Let me come back to you.
Make sure that you put subsidies, put price control on the basic products, and make sure that you tax the rich and tax the businessman.
You know, you surely know that I'm coming back to you after the break, but let's hear from Honorable Kiplagat.
And I think you will give me more time because I think government is being pushed.
No, I think the finance expert here has tried his best to just explain on behalf of the
so
viewer.
Bunga, I think you know, sometimes when you're on the other side, you can be too imaginative. But now when you are wearing the shoe, you actually know where the shoe pinches.
All right.
It's important also to tell Bunga is that government has no money of its own. You know, sometimes we imagine this Mongrel Kola government that it has money to sort every issue, including up to what you do in your household, or even buying you all manner of things. Government has no money of its own. Government gets money from the people by paying taxes. And when they get that money, all these issues Bunga is saying can be sorted. So we need to tell ourselves the truth that government needs money, and government needs money through taxation. Now, where we are as a country, you know, sometimes, you know, there was the sweet times, but now we are in the hard times. The sweet times, we continued borrowing loan without looking at how sustainable it is. Now we are in the process of going to the debt anchor so that we can ensure that, because right now we are in around 9.3 trillion. We are hitting the threshold of 10 trillion. So we have now to go to percentage of GDP, which is around 55% of GDP to around 60% of GDP, which is not a bad thing in an economy that is growing. But in an economy that is ours, that whereby what you raise, 60% goes into paying the debt. For sure, if as Kamau had said, if you are raising 1.8 and you are paying out 1.4, you remain with 400. County governments alone need 400. So you remain with nothing. So which means everything that you do, it has to be borrowed. And you can imagine if as a country we are going to borrow to pay recurrent expenditure, to pay salaries, for sure we are sinking this country. And that is why as Kenya Kwanza, we have come and told our people the truth. That the truth is we need to raise our revenue so that we can reduce the borrowing gradually. Remember very well, the current budget that was passed by our handshake brothers, the borrowing alone was 1.1 trillion. But when we came in, we have not borrowed 1.1 trillion. Right now we are in 500. We want to add another 230. The one he was saying that one will push us to around 750. 750. We have saved alone around 400 billion that we have not borrowed from the portfolio that we should have borrowed. Going now to this budget that is coming, that we are going to pass, what we have done is that instead of borrowing 1.2 trillion, we are going to borrow 630 billion.
Okay.
We have reduced by half. And if we go on that trajectory, it follows that within 3 years, we might have reduced the borrowing to a balanced budget. We will, just the same way the Kibaki government was running, that we don't need to borrow. And when we are in that state, we are now at the trajectory where we can now start growing our economy on ourselves. And Mark, what you realize, and I think it is actually good when you are in ICU, you accept the medicine, because if you are sick and you are told the only medicine that can save you is quinine, and then you refuse to take quinine, so you will die. So what we are saying as a country, the path of borrowing is no longer visible. For sure, unless we want to sell ourselves to these foreigners or to be managed by for the country to be auctioned, we cannot not go that path. Remember,
as I take a short break,
wait a minute.
Yes, I have to take a
Chinese
commercial break. Yes.
The reason we are going to Chinese is that their workers, through pension schemes, they save up to 40%. In Kenya, nobody saves. We are just consuming what we get per month. We just consume everything. So it is important that when you are in such a state of a country where you cannot get savings for government even to get funding from locally, you to save 3%. And if you save that 3%, the employer will add you another 3%. And then 7 years down the line, if you have saved 500, you can as well say, I need my money, you will be paid. You can as well say, I need to put to the house to buy a house, you will be given a house. So it is actually a way of making sure that we save and we make our country have enough local revenue that the government can be able to use to implement projects.
All right, thank you very much. I'm still coming back with the panel. We're not going anywhere yet with the feedback as well. And remember, I've just really enjoyed your example of if you're in the ICU and they say you ought to take quinine, you don't reject the medicine. I'll come back to questions where someone is saying, and of course, Senator Sifuna in a televised interview said, don't force us to save when we have nothing to save, according to him, not to me. We'll be right back on this matter.
Everybody has got to learn how to put in some effort and some energy in order to make their dreams come to pass. Manage your resources, especially in this day when we